The first tremor of unease rippled through the Carthos Prime trade spire long before the explosion. Ambassador Threxian Vhal'kor felt it in the subtle shifts of scent and vibration that his species had honed across millennia of battlefield diplomacy. The Varkan were not easily rattled, but the ambassador's crest lay pressed flat against his skull as he moved through the great atrium, flanked only by a pair of ceremonial aides. He had come bearing information capable of preventing a war, yet the summit's chaotic energy prickled like a warning beneath his scales. He advanced through the marketplace corridor that fed into the main chamber. Merchants of a dozen worlds shouted over one another, each stall glowing with its own palette of holographic enticements. Carthos Prime was a jewel of neutrality, but today Threxian felt as if even the air wanted to bolt for cover. The Shattered Fong, a rogue splinter of his own people, had vowed to disrupt the summit, and their threats had proved far from idle in recent years. Threxian knew they would strike if they had even the slightest opening. He tightened his grip on his diplomatic tablet and continued forward, his stride firm but measured. Every instinct urged him to call for a full Varkan guard escort, but arriving in force would jeopardize the fragile image of cooperation he had spent years nurturing. Peace required vulnerability, or at least the illusion of it. So he walked alone, trusting the summit's security to do its job. Among the crowd, a lone human man caught his attention, not because he moved strangely, but precisely because he did not. While others jostled and cursed and negotiated, this man navigated the chaos with a calm, practiced ease. He was tall, weathered, carrying a bag of children's toys and ration packs. A civilian, clearly, and yet there was something about the precision of his posture that Threxian recognized. Soldiers shared a particular tension in their shoulders, a readiness they never quite shed. The human glanced up briefly, made eye contact for the briefest fraction of a breath, then turned away. Threxian brushed the moment aside and proceeded toward the chamber doors. The blast struck before he reached them. A monstrous concussion hurled bodies into the air, ripped banners from their mounts, and turned glass-fronted stalls into clouds of razored shrapnel. Threxian hit the floor hard, vision spinning, his crest ringing from the shock. Smoke swallowed the corridor as screams rose in waves. The ambush had come precisely where he had feared, public, chaotic, impossible to contain. Through the haze, he glimpsed 3 figures in jagged armor sprinting toward him. The Shattered Fong. Their blades glimmered with toxin sheen, each stroke meant to kill swiftly and publicly. Threxian staggered to his feet, reached for the emergency beacon on his wrist, only to have it shot clean off by a sizzling bolt of plasma. His aides were already gone. He stood alone. The assassins closed in. Then the human from moments earlier appeared as though stepping out of smoke. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He moved with lethal intent disguised beneath mundane clothing. Without words, he seized Threxian by the arm and shoved him behind an overturned stall. The human's face was set in a flint-hard mask of focus as he grabbed a metal display rod and snapped it over his knee with an ease that belied human strength. The first assassin lunged. The human pivoted fluidly, bringing the broken rod across the attacker's helm. The blow rang like a struck bell, sending the assassin sprawling. A second rushed in with a serrated blade aimed at the human's ribs, but the man sidestepped and drove an elbow into the attacker's throat. The movement was surgical, efficient, terrifying in its precision. Threxian watched, frozen between awe and disbelief. This was no ordinary civilian. The third assassin fired a plasma bolt that seared past Threxian's shoulder, scorching the floor. The human tackled him aside, grunting as a shard of debris sliced into his arm. Blood dripped freely, but he didn't pause. He swept up a fallen Fong weapon, fired 2 controlled shots, and sent the remaining attackers scrambling for cover. "Move," the human ordered, voice low, steady. Not a command barked by a soldier, but one spoken by a man trying desperately not to let anyone die today. Threxian obeyed, without hesitation. The human guided him through the wreckage, using overturned kiosks and collapsed support beams as cover, navigating with uncanny instinct as alarms wailed overhead. They slipped into a side corridor, the chaos fading behind them. The human leaned against the wall, breathing hard but still poised, eyes sharp and scanning. Up close, Threxian saw lines etched into the man's face, grief-worn, sleep-starved, burdened by more than experience alone. "You saved my life," Threxian rasped. The human shook his head once. "Just doing what needed doing." Threxian reached out, intending to demand the man's name, to offer him the honor and gratitude required by Vhal'kor tradition. But when he blinked, the human was already walking away, melting into the flood of evacuees rushing down the corridor. "Wait," Threxian called, but his voice was lost to the noise. The human did not turn back. He vanished into the crowd with the same unassuming ease with which he had arrived, leaving Threxian alone in the smoke-stained passage, gripping the memory of a man who had intervened without hesitation, explanation, or reward. Security forces finally reached him, weapons raised, shouting questions, but Threxian barely heard them. His mind remained fixed on the man who had defied both danger and anonymity. A human father, if the toys in his bag meant anything. A lone protector who walked into fire and walked away without a word. As medics guided him towards safety, Threxian realized he had been given more than survival. He had been given a mystery, one that refused to loosen its hold on his thoughts. Whoever that man was, he had altered the course of the ambassador's life, and, perhaps, the fragile future of two worlds. And Threxian Vhal'kor, bound by Vhal'kor honor, vowed silently that he would not let this deed vanish into smoke. The man who had saved him would be found. Threxian Vhal'kor returned to the summit chambers the following day, but the weight of the previous night's events pressed down on him like a physical force. The explosion had been contained, the delegates unharmed, and the summit continued as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Yet for Threxian, nothing was ordinary anymore. The human who had saved him lingered in his thoughts, an enigma wrapped in the ordinary trappings of civilian life. How could one man, unarmed and seemingly untrained, dismantle 3 assassins and vanish without leaving a trace? Security footage provided only partial answers. Cameras along the evacuation routes captured glimpses of the human's movements, fluid, decisive, and almost supernaturally precise. He moved with the calculated grace of someone trained to anticipate danger rather than react to it. The analysts marveled at the footage, but Threxian saw more than technique. He saw resolve, a determination sharpened by personal stakes. He felt it keenly, as though he could almost sense the human's motivations beneath the surface of his silent actions. The summit security teams had attempted to identify the man through registries, passenger manifests, and biometric scans, but he had left nothing to trace. No records, no distinguishing features beyond the generic civilian attire, no signs of affiliation with any known militia or corporation. It was as though he had materialized from thin air to perform his singular act and then dissolved back into obscurity. Threxian's curiosity hardened into an obsession. In Vhal'kor culture, a life saved created a debt of honor. The debt demanded acknowledgement, and acknowledgement required knowing the savior. Meanwhile, on the far side of the galaxy, Marcus Hale lived a life carefully designed to remain invisible. His home on Dessa 4 was a modest dwelling nestled among rolling plains and rust-colored rock formations. Every morning, he rose before dawn, preparing his son's breakfast, checking supplies, and quietly maintaining the systems that kept their settlement functional. Marcus had not sought danger for years. His skills had been honed for conflict, yet he had left that world behind when his wife died, dedicating himself wholly to raising Orion. To re-emerge now, even indirectly, carried risks he was unwilling to take. Orion, 8 years old, was a spark of life and curiosity. He filled their home with questions, laughter, and the unfiltered energy of youth. Marcus watched him carefully, every instinct alert to the smallest hint of danger, every lesson imbued with subtle training. Orion did not know his father's past, but he knew enough to recognize that Marcus moved through the world with caution and awareness uncommon for a man of his age. Back on Carthos Prime, Threxian followed every lead with meticulous care. He interviewed witnesses who had glimpsed the human, A merchant who swore he saw the man lift a heavy crate like it weighed nothing, a child who remembered the human speaking in calm tones as if orchestrating the chaos itself, a security officer who admitted he had never seen such precise improvisation. Threxian documented each account, cross-referencing every detail for inconsistencies, patterns, or markers that could reveal the man's identity. The deeper he delved, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary human. A breakthrough came in the form of a seemingly innocuous clue, a small trinket dropped near the evacuee route, unnoticed by the chaos of the morning. It was a children's toy, scuffed and worn, stamped with an emblem from a distant colony, Dessa 4. Threxian recognized the insignia from his interstellar archives, a system used for colony identification and civic record tracking. The trail was faint but tangible, a thread leading across the void of space directly to the human's home world. When Threxian arrived on Dessa 4, he found a settlement modest in scale and carefully shielded from prying eyes. The colony's layout suggested deliberate design for privacy, narrow streets winding around communal structures, sensors calibrated to detect anomalies without broadcasting data outward. Marcus had chosen well. Yet despite these precautions, Threxian felt the resonance of the man's presence even before seeing him. Honor, duty, and a protective instinct radiated from Marcus in a subtle but undeniable aura. Their first meeting was fraught with tension. Marcus did not draw weapons, but his stance communicated readiness. His eyes, sharp and wary, measured the Vhal'kor carefully. Threxian approached slowly, hands visible, scales reflecting the sunlight in dull metallic hues. He did not demand recognition or immediate allegiance. Instead, he knelt in the Vhal'kor gesture of submission, an act both respectful and binding. "You saved my life," Threxian said quietly, the words carrying weight beyond simple gratitude. "And for that, I am bound to you by honor." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he shook his head. "I didn't do it for honor. I did it for the child I couldn't let get hurt. Nothing more." Threxian studied him, sensing the layers beneath the man's words. This was a father first, a soldier second, and a ghost to the world at large. Marcus's refusal to accept accolades, to reveal himself, demonstrated a discipline tempered by grief and devotion. Here was a man who had faced death countless times, yet chose invisibility over recognition. Before departing, Threxian offered a token of Vhal'kor culture, a small ceremonial crest meant to signify life debt, a symbol that in their world demanded repayment. Marcus accepted it silently, pocketing the object without ceremony, as if acknowledging a responsibility he did not intend to honor publicly. Threxian understood immediately. Marcus's boundaries were clear, defined not by fear but by principle. Yet even as the ambassador left Dessa 4, both men understood that the world was far from safe. The shattered Fong, though driven back on Carthos Prime, had learned someone had interfered. Their networks would be seeking Marcus, attempting to track the human whose intervention had undone their plans. Danger lingered at the edges of this quiet settlement, invisible yet imminent. As Threxian returned to interstellar space, his mind remained fixed on the human father, the quiet warrior who had entered fire without hesitation and vanished without reward. Marcus Hale had shifted the balance of power in ways neither could fully predict, and in doing so had bound two worlds together through a single, silent act of courage. The Vhal'kor ambassador resolved that this bond, however invisible to the galaxy, must be honored, and the human, when the time came, would be found. Marcus watched the shuttle fade into the sky with Orion at his side. The boy did not yet understand the significance of the events, but he felt the tension in his father's shoulders. Marcus bent to meet his gaze. "Some things are bigger than us," he said softly. "And sometimes we have to face them alone." Orion nodded, trusting the calm authority in his father's voice. Marcus's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the first stars of evening shimmered above Dessa 4. He knew that peace was temporary, that recognition would come whether he sought it or not, and that his quiet life would not remain untouched for long. And yet, for tonight, father and son were safe. That certainty, however fleeting, was worth every risk taken, every act of quiet heroism, every step into the chaos that had defined Marcus Hale. The warning arrived as a subtle pulse in Threxian's personal comlink, a message routed through secure Vhal'kor channels. The shattered Fong had identified Marcus Hale as the human who intervened on Carthos Prime. Threxian's scales bristled with tension, a mixture of dread and duty. The rogue faction was nothing if not persistent. Now they would come for Marcus, for the life debt, or perhaps for vengeance. Every instinct urged immediate action, but Threxian also knew that rushing in recklessly could alert the Fong to Marcus's exact location and jeopardize both him and his son. Back on Dessa, 4. Marcus sensed the shift before the warning arrived. He had trained his awareness for years, reading subtle cues in the environment, anticipating threats long before they manifested. The colony's perimeter sensors blinked in quiet synchronization, and he noticed faint disturbances in the normally steady rhythm of communications traffic. Whatever it was approaching. He looked at Orion, now older and sharper than his years, and felt the familiar knot of paternal urgency tighten. "They're coming," Marcus murmured, voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. Orion's eyes widened, but he remained silent. Marcus had prepared him for danger, not just the physical, but the necessity of staying calm, of observing before reacting. They moved quickly, securing the perimeter and establishing fallback positions within the settlement. This was no mere skirmish. Marcus recognized the patterns of tactical engagement. He could see the assault taking shape in his mind, each vector, each threat trajectory, each choice a potential matter of life or death. The shattered Fong struck as twilight painted the plains in deep amber. A small contingent slipped past outer sensors, masked by electromagnetic interference designed to mimic natural fluctuations in the environment. Marcus had anticipated this. The initial assault encountered traps carefully set among the natural rock formations and shallow trenches. Energy nets snagged the first wave, electroshock emitters disrupted coordination, and the Fong's advance faltered. Marcus moved among them like a shadow, quiet but precise, his hands disabling weapons, guiding civilians to shelter, and ensuring Orion remained unseen and unharmed. Despite his efforts, the Fong adapted quickly. Their commander, a wiry, cruel-eyed man with a jagged scar tracing his jawline, rallied the second wave. They forced their way deeper into the settlement, and Marcus realized that ordinary defenses would not suffice. He retrieved old gear from a hidden cache, relics of a life he had sworn never to revisit. Each piece was familiar, a tool of survival honed over years of conflict. Orion watched, fear mingled with awe, as his father prepared. Marcus knelt briefly beside his son. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice soft but unyielding. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to act despite it. Today we protect ourselves and we protect others. Understand?" Orion nodded. Marcus's eyes softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. There was no room for hesitation now. The battle unfolded with brutal efficiency. Marcus led the Fong into a labyrinth of cover and traps, forcing them to split and exposing weak points in their formation. He engaged in hand-to-hand combat with a few attackers at a time, his movements economical and devastating, conserving energy while maximizing impact. Each strike was deliberate, each maneuver protective of both his son and the civilians. For all his skill, Marcus never lost sight of the stakes. This was a fight to survive, not to conquer. Midway through the assault, a familiar hum heralded the arrival of Threxian. The Vhal'kor ambassador and his contingent of elite guards had tracked the Fong through hyperspace corridors and arrived just in time to reinforce Marcus. Threxian observed with grim satisfaction as Marcus operated with a calm precision that matched any Vhal'kor combatant. Yet, even as they fought side by side, it was clear Marcus was guided by something different, a father's unshakable determination. The collaboration between human and Vhal'kor shifted the battle's momentum. Where Marcus anticipated and countered, Threxian struck with overwhelming power, the two complementing each other seamlessly. Civilians were evacuated through prearranged routes, while the Fong's numbers dwindled under the combined force. Marcus's hands, though marked with bruises and blood, never faltered. His mind moved faster than the chaos surrounding him. Finally, Marcus confronted the Fong commander directly. The man lunged with a serrated blade, reckless in desperation. Marcus sidestepped with the fluidity of years of training, using the opponent's momentum to leverage him against a rock formation. A single, precise strike ended the immediate threat without unnecessary violence. The remaining attackers, seeing their leader defeated and their plans unraveling, fled into the night, leaving the settlement in uneasy quiet. Breathing heavily, Marcus checked on Orion first, then the civilians. Threxian approached, his expression a mixture of respect and concern. "You could have left," he said quietly, acknowledging the immense effort Marcus had expended alone. Marcus shook his head. "Leaving wasn't an option. I've spent years teaching my son that we act when we must, and sometimes that means facing more than we ever thought we could. Running only passes danger on to those who cannot defend themselves." Threxian nodded, recognizing the philosophy that had guided the human all along. This was not heroism born of pride or ambition. It was courage rooted in responsibility. Marcus Hale had chosen to fight for life and duty, not recognition. As the settlement settled into tense calm, Threxian offered Marcus the chance to leave for safety, to accompany him into protected territory. Marcus declined. The risk was not worth uprooting more lives than necessary, and his boundaries were clear. Threxian understood. This man operated by his own code, and it was not for any outsider to break. The battle had ended, but the echoes of it remained. Marcus's skills, his quiet decisiveness, and the bond he had forged with Threxian during combat elevated him from mere legend to a figure whose actions might ripple far beyond Dessa. 4. Both men knew the world had taken notice, even if Marcus had chosen to remain unseen. As night fell over the plains, Marcus and Orion stood together, surveying the remnants of the ambush. Marcus's face was weary but composed. His eyes held the quiet satisfaction of duty fulfilled. He knelt to Orion's level. "Remember this," he said softly. "We act when we must. But we also protect the future, and that's our most important battle." Orion nodded, his small hand slipping into his father's larger one. The stars above shimmered coldly, yet beneath them burned the steadfast light of determination. Marcus Hale, the human who had intervened when needed most, had secured not only survival but the lesson that courage and responsibility are inseparable. And far beyond Dessa, 4. Threxian watched, knowing that the debt of honor had been observed and that the human father who had saved him once might again shape events in ways no one could yet predict. The stage was set, the players defined, and the galaxy itself seemed to wait with bated breath for the next act. The aftermath of the battle left Dessa for quiet, but Marcus knew the calm was only temporary. News of the human father, who had saved an alien diplomat and dismantled the shattered Fong, spread faster than he could have imagined. Transmissions leaked through black market channels, sensors on distant trade routes picked up whispers, and rumors took shape in the crowded halls of interstellar stations. Marcus had no desire for fame, no interest in accolades or recognition. All he wanted was a life for Orion that remained ordinary, safe, and unremarkable. Even so, attention was inevitable. Threxian Vhal'kor had petitioned the Galactic Council to honor the man who had prevented catastrophe, a move that could draw political scrutiny to Marcus's settlement. Threxian's intentions were honorable, but Marcus understood immediately that any formal recognition could endanger them. He had survived conflicts by remaining unseen, and he would not allow his son to become a pawn in a galaxy-wide drama. That night, Marcus stood at the edge of the settlement, watching Orion sleep beneath a thin canopy of woven fiber. The boy's steady breathing was the only sound amid the wind whispering through the red plains. Marcus had spent years teaching him the subtle art of observation, the necessity of patience, and the courage to act when circumstances demanded. The lesson he had imparted today was far more immediate, that survival sometimes required vanishing without a trace. He packed supplies quietly, moving with the precision of someone who had done this before, though in truth, the stakes had never been higher. Every item, every route, every concealment had been planned for contingencies he hoped never came. Orion stirred, and Marcus bent to meet his gaze. "We're leaving tonight," he said softly. Quietly, carefully. "No one must know where we go." Orion nodded, trusting his father's judgment implicitly, as he always did. Outside the settlement, a shuttle waited. Its registration and signature were untraceable, constructed in secret and maintained for precisely such contingencies. Marcus guided Orion aboard, settling him into the seat while he ran a final systems check. For a brief moment, Marcus allowed himself to acknowledge the weight of what they were doing, leaving behind a home, abandoning the illusion of normalcy, all for the fragile promise of safety. As they lifted off, Marcus cast one last glance at Dessa. 4. The plains stretched endlessly beneath them, scarred with the faint outlines of the traps and barriers he had set. It had been a successful defense, but the memory of the shattered Fong's brutality lingered. Somewhere in the galaxy, they would regroup, and someday they might return. Yet Marcus would be ready. He always was. Threxian watched from a discreet observation point, hidden from sensors, but close enough to see the human disappear into the night. He understood Marcus's choice fully. The Vhal'kor honor code demanded recognition, repayment, even indebtedness, but he could not force it upon a man who had chosen otherwise. Instead, he stored the memory of Marcus Hale carefully, a private ledger of respect and gratitude. The bond forged through blood, courage, and necessity needed no witness. The galaxy, however, would not forget so easily. Whispers began in distant ports and space stations, a lone human who could stand against trained killers, who saved diplomats, who vanished without explanation. In certain circles, the story grew into legend, a ghostly figure whose presence signaled hope and caution in equal measure. Marcus had no interest in becoming a myth, yet the myth had begun regardless. A week into their journey, Marcus checked on Orion as the boy gazed out the viewport at the swirling stars. "Do you understand why we move like this?" Marcus asked, voice calm, eyes steady. "Yes, father," Orion replied. "We stay safe so we can live, and we protect people who can't protect themselves." Marcus's lips pressed together, a faint smile tugging at the corners. The lesson had been absorbed. The boy was growing into the values he held dear: courage, restraint, responsibility. In that moment, Marcus felt a measure of peace. Even in exile, the essence of life, the protection of those one loved, remained intact. They settled on a distant frontier world, one with limited sensors and a sparse population. Marcus chose a simple dwelling on the edge of a cliff overlooking a blackened canyon, a natural barrier that offered concealment. Orion explored freely under his watchful gaze, discovering small wildlife and hidden paths, yet always returning to the shelter his father had prepared. The rhythms of ordinary life resumed: meals, lessons, chores, quiet evenings under the stars. Marcus's vigilance never waned, but the tension eased slightly, replaced by the comforting cadence of routine. Even as they began to rebuild anonymity, Marcus knew the world beyond would always intrude. The shattered Fong, the Galactic Council, and countless others could never fully release their curiosity or need for resolution. Yet Marcus had mastered the art of presence without visibility, the delicate balance between impact and disappearance. He had proven that one man, acting with intelligence and principle, could alter events of galactic significance without ever seeking recognition. On the final night of Section 4, Marcus stood on the cliff's edge, Orion beside him, watching the horizon shimmer with distant starlight. "We survived today," Marcus said quietly. "Tomorrow may bring new challenges, but we face them together." Orion nodded, eyes bright with trust and certainty. Marcus inhaled the cool night air, feeling the weight of the past battles and the responsibility of the future converge. Far above, in the cold expanse of space, Threxian watched, aware that Marcus Hale's legend, silent though it was, would echo across worlds. He would remain a mystery, an unseen guardian, a human who acted because it was right, not because it would be remembered. And yet, for those who needed hope, for those who faced impossible odds, Marcus Hale's presence, though invisible, was a beacon. In the quiet, father and son turned from the edge, stepping back into their modest home. Marcus checked the locks and systems, ensuring no sensor, no trace, no record betrayed them. As Orion prepared for sleep, Marcus glanced at the stars once more. Somewhere out there, the galaxy would continue to unfold in chaos and wonder, but tonight, he had preserved the one thing that mattered most: life, safety, and the integrity of their own quiet existence. And though Marcus Hale had no desire to be a hero, no wish to step into the history books, the truth lingered. The galaxy had already taken notice. A lone human father had acted when it counted, and in doing so, had left an indelible mark on two worlds. The future remained uncertain, but Marcus knew one thing above all: he would always act when necessary, and he would always protect his son, no matter the cost.